Okay, let's talk about something that sounds, I'll admit, a little dry. Sorting the references at the end of a paper. But you gotta stick with me on this one, because hiding inside this everyday task is a beautiful 300-year-old mathematical secret that tells us something profound about randomness itself. So picture it. You've just poured your heart and soul into a huge paper. As you were writing, you cited your sources, numbering them 1, 2, 3, and so on. Now it's time to sort that list alphabetically for the final version. So, what do you think the odds are that just by sheer luck, the reference you cited fifth ends up as the fifth reference in the final alphabetical list? What about 2 or 3 of them staying put? And it's this simple two-step dance that sets up the whole puzzle. We start with one order, the order you wrote it in, and then we shuffle it into a completely new order based on the alphabet. This transformation, this reshuffling, is where all the interesting stuff happens. Now, when one of your references, let's say your original number 8, also happens to land in the 8th position after you alphabetize it, well, that's not just a happy little coincidence. Mathematicians actually have a specific name for that. It's called a fixed point. It's an element that just stubbornly stays put while everything else gets jumbled around it. To put it another way, a fixed point is just any item in a list that survives a complete shuffle without changing its spot. So this whole bibliography problem is really just a hunt for these fixed points. The real question is, how many should we expect to find in any randomly shuffled list? And here's where it gets really fun. This isn't some obscure problem only academics worry about. Turns out, our bibliography issue is mathematically identical to a much more famous and playful brain teaser. It's known as the hat check problem. Imagine a bunch of people go to a party and check their hats. But oh no, the attendant loses all the claim tickets and just starts handing hats back completely at random. The question is, what is the probability that at least one person gets their very own hat back? See? It's our Dear Ari problem, just with hats instead of research papers. And this is the aha moment. The reference is the hat. The original citation number, that's the man who owns the hat. And the final, sorted alphabetical position, that's just the random person who gets a hat handed to them. A reference keeping its number is exactly the same as a man getting his own hat back. They're the same problem, just wearing different outfits. And this isn't just some modern thought experiment we cooked up. As it turns out, we've stumbled into a puzzle that has a surprisingly deep history. This whole thing was first posed way back in 1708 by a guy named Pierre de Montmort. And he wasn't thinking about hats or papers. He was analyzing a card game. From there, mathematical giants like Bernoulli and Euler jumped in to figure it out. And over the centuries, it's become this classic puzzle that's taught to math students all over the world. Its official historical name is the Rencontres problem, which comes from the French word for encounter or match. And that's the perfect name, isn't it? We're literally looking for an encounter between an item's original spot and its final one. So whether we're talking about cards, hats, or references, it's all about the probability of a random match. Okay, so we've got the setup, we've got the history. Now it's time for the main event, the answer. And I promise you, it is probably not what you're thinking. So let me ask you directly. Let's say you have a list of 50 references, and you shuffle them alphabetically. On average, if you did this over and over with thousands of papers, how many of those references would you expect to stay in the same spot? 2, 5, maybe it's a fraction, like half a match? Just take a guess. The average number of matches is exactly 1. And here is the truly wild part. The average is always 1. It does not matter if you have a tiny bibliography with 10 sources or a gigantic one with 10,000 sources. The expected number of references that will keep their original number is always stubbornly 1. That stability is the secret at the heart of this whole thing. So what about the probabilities? Well, what are the chances of getting at least one match? Turns out it's pretty high. About 63.2%. So yeah, more often than not, you actually will find at least one reference that stays put. The chance of a perfect shuffle where nothing matches is only about 36.8%. But the chance of getting multiple matches drops off, and it drops off fast. Getting at least 2 happens about a quarter of the time, but finding at least 3, now you're down to just 8%. Finding 5 or more matches is so incredibly rare, less than 0.5%, that if you saw it happen, you'd probably start to suspect the list wasn't really shuffled randomly at all. So why are these numbers so consistent? Well, it all comes down to a really special number that shows up all over nature and finance, the mathematical constant, E. The probabilities very quickly settle or converge to a value that's determined by E. Once your list has more than about 10 items, the size just doesn't matter anymore. The math is ruled by this universal constant, and that's why the answer is the same for 10 hats or 10,000 references. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because this little bibliography problem actually tells us something really important about how we test and understand randomness in the real world. It is really important not to mix this up with the more famous birthday paradox. The birthday paradox asks if any two people in a group share a birthday. See, our problem is much more specific. It's asking if person number 5 gets hat number 5. Notice the key difference. The birthday problem's probability shoots up towards 100% as the group gets bigger, while our probability just locks in at that stable 63.2%. And believe me, this isn't just a mathematical party trick. This exact principle is used to test for true randomness. If a computer's shuffle algorithm is supposed to be random, but it consistently gives you an average of, say, 2 fixed points instead of 1, you know that algorithm is flawed. It's used to check everything from random number generators to the security of cryptographic ciphers. Which brings us right to the big takeaway here. What looks like pure, unpredictable chaos on the surface, a jumbled mess of references or hats or numbers, is actually being governed by an incredibly precise and predictable mathematical law. There's this beautiful, hidden order right there inside the randomness. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. This math gives us a perfect baseline for what true, unbiased randomness looks like. So it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? The choices you make in your own life, the ones that feel totally spontaneous and random, are they? Or do they follow hidden patterns that make you far more predictable than a simple shuffled list?